He was a gaunt and gentle man, friends and neighbors, faces wet with rain, and wet, too, with tears of affection, gathered at the station of the Great Western Railroad in Springfield, Illinois, on the 11th of February, 1861. From the rear platform of the train that would carry him to immortality, the tall man said,
"To this place and the kindness of these people, I owe everything. Here I have lived a quarter of a century and have passed from a young to an old man. I now leave, not knowing when or whether ever I may return, with a task before me greater than that which rested on Washington."
South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Louisiana, Alabama, Mississippi, Texas. They had already seceded. In drowsy towns, in dusty hamlets, down past the general store, across the square that fronted the courthouse, drums rolled, fifes played. Old rifles were repaired, farm boys honed down their hunting knives, and one military company they called the Bartown Yankee Killers, another the Cherokee Lincoln Killers. Gay, fearless, defiant, their voices filled the air.
Stumps are fired on. The ball is opened at last.
The North read 3 days later the president's call for 75,000 troops to defend the Union, and the Chicago Tribune declared, "Old Abe's blood is up." Balmy April weather crept northward, where now other drums rolled, fifes played. Then in New York City, the boots of the 12th Massachusetts beat out a cadence, and singing voices transformed the fanatic of Harper's Ferry into a legend and a pledge.
Oh
hot July of 1861, the bitter reality of First Bull Run awoke both North and South to the realization that the war could be long, bloody, fatal to the Union. Lincoln called for more troops. In Chicago, a great war meeting was held in front of the courthouse, and, inspired by a rising wave of patriotic sentiment, George F. Root wrote the rousing battle cry of freedom.
Yes, we'll rally round the flag, boys, we'll rally once again, shouting the battle cry of freedom. We will rally from the hillside, we'll gather from the plain, shouting the battle cry of freedom. And forever, hurrah, boys, hurrah, down with the traitor, up with the star, while we rally round the flag, boys, rally once again, shouting the battle cry of
Boys wearing the blue and the gray waited in camp, drilled, marched aimlessly, waited again while generals argued over strategy and tactics. Nighttime brought loneliness, homesickness. Around flickering campfires, soldiers shared their emotions in sentimental ballads. Union lads sang to a Yankee girl in Fort Monroe. Southern boys sang to the yellow rose of Texas.
There's a yellow rose of Texas that I am going to see. No other darky knows her, no darky, only me. She cried so when I left her, it like to broke my heart. And if I ever find her, we never more apart. She's the sweetest, most colors, it's darky ever knows. Her eyes are bright and scarlet, they sparkle like the dew. They talk about your dearest name, you sing of rose of me. The yellow rose of Texas, the yellow rose of Tennessee. But the yellow rose of Texas needs the bells of Tennessee.
The time is December 1861. A carriage brings Julia Ward Howe back to Washington after a visit to nearby Union camps across the Potomac in Virginia. Along the road, she hears blue-clad soldiers singing.
John Brown's body lies a mouldering in the grave. His soul is marching on.
With Mrs. Howe rides James Freeman Clark, her pastor, who speaks.
Mrs. Howe, why do you not write some good words for that stirring tune?
I have often wished to do just that.
The war was fought in 10,000 places. Fought on battlefields, in border raids, in picket skirmishes along dusty, now forgotten roads. But Mrs. Howe gave it a new front, the quiet pews of northern churches, where the sunlight was softened by stained glass windows. Up the Tennessee River, fancy river packets commandeered by the Union carried carefree boys to the bloody battlefields of Shiloh. Those who lived could never be boys again. McClellan thrown back on the peninsula. The Union roundly defeated at Second Bull Run. In 1862, Lincoln once more called for volunteers to fill the ranks of his depleted armies. In the New York Evening Post for July 16th appeared a poem that, set to music, again rallied the North. Then, in September, the Union claimed a victory at Antietam. Lincoln summoned his cabinet to the White House to hear a proclamation.
I do order and declare that all persons held as slaves within said designated states are and henceforth forever shall be free.
The North responded with a song of Negro jubilation. The Emancipation Proclamation captured the imaginations of freedom-loving people everywhere. When the news reached London, a woman ran through the streets shouting,
"Lincoln's been gone and done it."
but the proclamation was only a promise. The need for patience remained.
Let my people go. Let my people go. Way down in Egypt land, tell, O Pharaoh, let my people go.
July 3rd, 1863, ended the bloodletting at Gettysburg. Later that year, the President of the United States dedicated a military cemetery on this hallowed ground.
The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. That this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom. And that government of the people shall not perish from the earth.
But the war went on. Yet there had come a change. In the West emerged two great generals, Grant and Sherman. One came east to duel with Lee, and the other smashed at Atlanta. Then, disappearing like a mole, marched his army to the sea. On Palm Sunday, 1865, when a nation that trusted in God had gone to church, Grant and Lee met at Appomattox Courthouse. When next day news of Lee's surrender reached Washington, crowds gathered at the White House to serenade Lincoln. The president, more gaunt after 4 years, rejoined the South in song.
I thought Dixie was one of the best tunes I ever heard. I had heard that our adversaries over the way had attempted to appropriate it. I insisted yesterday that we had fairly captured it. I presented the question to the Attorney General, and he gave it as his opinion, that it is our lawful prize. I asked the band to give us a good turn with it.
in this ballad of the North and South, Walt Whitman raises his voice.
My captain does not answer. His lips are pale and still. My father does not feel my own. He has no pulse nor From fearful trip, from fearful trip, from fearful trip, the victor ship comes in with object one, exalt ocean and ring with mournful tread, walk the deck my captain lies.
With object one, so sang the poet, and the people responded.
The beauty of the